Even after losing a significant amount of weight, belly fat may persist. This is due to the fact that belly fat is not limited to the area beneath your skin. Additionally, it is visceral fat that surrounds your internal organs. It is therefore crammed around your pancreas, liver, and stomach. And a lot of the chronic diseases that are slowly killing us now are caused by this fat. Thus, diabetes, fatty liver, heart disease, and even cancer are caused by visceral fat. The good news is that once you know how to target it, visceral fat is the easiest fat to lose, despite the fact that it is harmful. In this video, I'll demonstrate how to target visceral fat directly and burn it off as soon as possible. We will thus discuss the ideal foods and beverages to include in your regimen. After that, I want to go over the top exercises that will provide you with the most value for your money. Let's start with food, because the things you eat on a daily basis either cause or contribute to your visceral fat. And foods high in carotenoid are one of the most effective ways to combat visceral fat. Furthermore, carotenoids are only plants' natural hues. They are responsible for the orange hue of carrots, and tomatoes get their red color from that. This is the reason spinach has a dark green hue. It's not just the hue, though. Strong antioxidants are carotenoids, and that's crucial since extra energy is a major contributor to visceral fat, which in turn causes inflammation and metabolic disruption. Therefore, carotenoids neutralize free radicals to lessen that stress. Alternatively, these unstable chemicals simply harm cells. Additionally, carotenoids aid in gene stabilization by eliminating free radicals. In particular, carotenoids have the ability to activate genes that increase fat burning. In fact, they suppress genes that instruct your body to accumulate fat. Additionally, a randomized double-blind research in Japan examined the potential impact of carotenoid intake on visceral fat, and they discovered that visceral fat was decreased after just 8 weeks of consuming vegetables high in carotenoid content, particularly the group assigned at random to the low lutein and high lycopene group, which included shiitake cabbage and carrots in the investigation. However, I want to highlight that all 4 groups who consumed vegetables high in carotenoid reduced their visceral fat. So, how does your diet provide these carotenoids? Just focus on your favorite vibrant veggies. Thus, vegetables like bell peppers, sweet potatoes, carrots, spinach, and squash. Name it. Any fruit or vegetable with a lot of color is probably high in carotenoid. Additionally, it will aid in the reduction of visceral fat. Catechins are a unique molecule that you should focus on following carotenoids. These flavonoid polyphenols also have antioxidant properties. They also lessen inflammation. Green tea is now my preferred method of obtaining catechins, and you constantly hear it. Green tea burns fat. It does too, and because it contains a lot of catechins, it does so. In essence, these substances alter how your body processes fat, particularly visceral fat. Catechins also aid in the management of fat in a variety of ways. First, catechins increase your energy expenditure and fat oxidation. In order to increase your total metabolism and burn more fat, they stimulate your neurological system. Furthermore, lipase and other enzymes involved in the breakdown of fat are inhibited by catechins. Thus, they prevent the absorption of fat from our diet in the first place. Additionally, green tea includes caffeine, which can promote fat burning or utilization by working in concert with catechins. This is why green tea is so potent. Additionally, a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized study conducted in Japan revealed that visceral fat was significantly reduced after just 12 weeks of consuming green tea enhanced with catechins, or roughly 600 micrograms of catechins daily. Just keep in mind that the majority of green teas contain a lot of catechins. However, you want to focus on minimally processed green teas to get the most out of the benefit. Matcha or sencha teas would be those. Ultimately, anything that results in a calorie or energy deficit will help you reduce your body weight and visceral fat proportions. However, focusing on certain foods and beverages will help you reach your goal far more quickly. And the perfect exercise routine will turn into that miracle multiplier if you figured out the right nutrients. Actually, if you want to lose visceral fat fast, you need to do the right kind of exercise. Even though both diet and exercise can reduce visceral fat, research like this meta-analysis of 117 studies indicates that while exercise tends to have better impacts on lowering visceral fat, diet has a greater influence on overall body weight loss. Additionally, an older but fascinating study demonstrated the potency of even a modest amount of exercise. Accordingly, visceral fat was reduced by 48% in this trial with just 2 45-minute cycling sessions per week at 75% of the VO2 peak for 2 months. In just 2 months, that's nearly half. In addition, this group experienced a 41% increase in insulin sensitivity and an 18% decrease in subcutaneous fat. Furthermore, they were required to perform this activity twice a week, which was by no means demanding. In the study, the intensity was assessed using VO2 peak rather than VO2 max. Since the study participants were probably not professional athletes, it is difficult to determine exactly what 75% meant for that average participant. However, I presume that their VO2 peak was below their VO2 max, or Zone 3 range, or roughly 70 to 80% of their maximal heart rate. They would therefore be in the low to moderate intensity range for this workout. It's that level of intensity where you sound a little exhausted but are still able to carry on a conversation and use complete phrases. The fact that the total body weight remained relatively constant is another intriguing tendency that emerges from those research. Despite the fact that there are no discernible changes on the scale, they have made amazing progress in reducing their visceral fat and increasing their insulin sensitivity. Additionally, I always discuss this crucial topic with my patients. Don't give up if you're following the perfect diet, exercising regularly, and moving around, but the weight is still not dropping. Because the number on the scale does not always reflect changes in your body composition and loss of fat mass, the scale is typically a rather bad measure of your success. Now, what is the most effective form of exercise that will help you shed visceral fat quickly? High-intensity interval training, or HIIT, and vigorous intensity aerobic exercise are the best exercise modalities for lowering visceral fat, according to a recent systematic review and meta-analysis that examined 84 randomized control studies. Additionally, when it came to visceral fat reduction, resistance exercise was still helpful but less successful. But that doesn't mean you should disregard resistance training. In actuality, resistance exercise is essential for preserving your muscle mass and is also critical for your metabolism and general well-being. However, increasing your cardio is generally a better option if you want to shed visceral fat quickly, such as over the next several months. When it comes to the effectiveness of HIIT versus aerobic exercise, there isn't much of a difference. There is no statistically significant difference between the two modalities in adults, according to research that examine direct comparisons. Now, if you really want to look into the data and the literature, there might be a hint that running is somewhat more beneficial than cycling when it comes to HIIT exercises. Additionally, some research indicates that HIIT may be more beneficial than aerobic exercise for children and young adults under the age of 24. But really, right now we're simply arguing over trivia. Ultimately, in my opinion, it makes little difference whether you engage in aerobic exercise, high-intensity interval training, or if you decide to run, row, dance, or cycle for your cardio. Consistency always outperforms the ideal plan, so the best workout is the one you'll really stick with. Therefore, the stroll you enjoy and can regularly do many times a week will always outperform the textbook perfect HIIT routine that you simply despise and only do twice a month. And according to the existing research, the optimal regimen would likely involve an activity that you can perform for at least 45 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week. Whatever you decide, it must be at least moderate to vigorous in activity, which means that your heart rate must be between 70% and 80% of its maximum. Additionally, a conversation test is a solid rule of thumb if you're not interested in monitoring or quantifying your heart rate. If you can speak in complete sentences but sound a little out of breath, you're engaging in a moderately intense activity. Additionally, if you can only say a few phrases before stopping to catch your breath, you're engaging in vigorous intensity exercise. The best thing about exercise is that its effects are dose-dependent, which means that the more you do it, the greater the results will be. According to a new study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, those who engage in more intense or regular exercise often have proportionately larger decreases in visceral fat. Conversely, they did not observe the dose-dependent response associated with dieting or calorie restriction, which implies that there is a limit to how much calorie restriction is possible and that there is no longer any genuine benefit beyond that. Therefore, starving yourself is not necessary to reduce belly fat. In fact, quite the contrary. Consume enough calories to maintain a slight calorie deficit, but if you want to reduce visceral fat more quickly, you can progressively increase your exercise and activity levels. Okay, I hope this was useful. I'll see you at the next one, and stay well.